Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are taking a bit of a detour. We are moving away from talking about money today. We're going to talk about psychedelics and the Enneagram. So if you're not into psychedelics, this might not be for you. And if you're not into the Enneagram, this might not be for you. But if you're just curious to learn about how they both combine, stay tuned. But in the last video, I discussed the lost psychedelic history of the Enneagram. We showed how the Enneagram actually has its roots in the psychedelic community. But here's the really fascinating, I've come up with three really big breakthroughs, and I feel it's important to share with the world. And that's why I'm taking this time from our usual programming to discuss this with you all. And the first big insight I've discovered in the broader category of psychedelics, what the Enneagram can do is predict the flavor or tone of the experiences that you're likely to have on a psychoactive compound. Well, why is that? Well, because what these psychedelic substances do is they provide, and I'm oversimplifying a very complicated process, and there's a wide range of substances we're talking about here. But in general, what they do is they provide a conscious experience of your unconscious mind. Okay, so you're having a conscious experience of your unconscious mind. Well, what's in your unconscious mind? Well, the Enneagram can predict that. And most importantly, what's down deep rooted in the core of your psyche is your greatest unconscious fear and your greatest hope, and which are the inverse of each other. So if I know your Enneagram type, I know your greatest fear, and therefore I know your greatest hope, which is the opposite of that. And then those tend to be the two poles that a psychedelic experience is going to sort of bounce between. So when you're going into a dark or negative experience, the flavor of that, the tone of that is predictable according to your Enneagram type. And same thing for the highs. And there's a wide range, complex range of possibilities in between those poles. But in general, in my anecdotal experience, again, this is not scientifically validated, but I'm sort of crowdsourcing. Here's what I'm seeing. Anybody else there seeing the same thing? Because if you are, and that's would be pretty remarkable, and something that is worth sharing with the world. So that's why I'm putting this out there. So this has been my experience. I'm curious to know if it's yours, and if it is, please put some comments in the chat. Let me know if there's anything I'm saying here resonates with you. And if it doesn't, I want to hear that too. If you can disprove these theories, that's really helpful information as well. So I'm not going down a wrong rabbit hole. But let me flesh this out a little bit more. And up on the chart here, what I've put on the screen is all 9 Enneagram types. You can see that I've gone over this chart in other videos, so I won't go through it in detail. But in yellow, what I've highlighted here are the highs and the lows for each Enneagram type on a psychedelic experience. So just your greatest hope flavors the experience of the highs, and your greatest fear flavors the experience of your lows. But then what's so useful about this, if we're talking about psychedelic assisted therapy, if you're a therapist or you're a guide or you're even having your own journey, then what it does is when things get dark, for example, then you know why, or where this is going, or what maybe someone needs to work through and push through in order to get to the other side of that experience. Because when dark things arise in psychedelics, the sort of general rule of thumb is the only way out is through, is to go deeper into it, is not to back away, the more you pull away from a scary experience on a psychedelic, the worse the fear, it tends to terrify you. So the thing is to go towards it and then through it, and then you tend to come out the other side and can go through those greatest fears and come out to something maybe on the positive side, closer towards your greatest hope. All right. And then this is really a valuable tool for if you're guiding somebody, then you know what they need to work on, or where is this going. You can predict, you're sort of 1 or 2 or 10 steps ahead of the person in terms of what's coming up. And then it's also a very valuable tool for integration afterwards. So whenever you're doing a psychedelic, you want to take the time to integrate the experience carefully afterwards. And the Enneagram can help you do that more effectively. All right. So these are the highs and lows. That's the first breakthrough. Let me show you the other really big breakthrough. I'm very excited about this one. So what I've put up here, I've put up the Enneagram, the color wheel with all 9 types. And that color wheel shows the sacred wound for each of the 9 types. We see then the greatest fear for each of those. But then if we look at the sadness triad, the sadness triad is often called the shame triad. And those are metaphorically, we call them the heart types. That's 2, 3, and 4. And the heart types means there's something wounded in how you feel about yourself and the world in various ways, depending on whether you're a 2, 3, or 4. But essentially, there's a wounding in the feeling center of your essence of your being. And then if you're in the fear triad, we call you the head types, because it tends to fear. If you ever see the movie Dune, fear is the mind killer, right? So you're essentially, there's something wounded in your head when you're gripped by fear. And then anger, and those are the head types are 5, 6, and 7. And if you're an anger type, we're often this is a metaphor, of course. So the body types or the gut types, because that's where your anger resides. That's 8, 9, and 1. Okay, but here's where, when we're talking about psychedelics, this gets really interesting. So we have what are called heart openers, and that's MDMA and MDA. And so what those do is they tend to primarily affect the feeling center of your body, of your essence body. I'm not sure what the word there is, but they tend to then they're going to open the heart and open the feeling center. And then we have what we call classical psychedelics. So psychedelic technically means mind opener. So that would be the psilocybin and LSD. So mind openers. And then we have what I would consider a body opener, a dissociative, and that would be ketamine. And so these are the 3 core substances we work with in psychedelic assisted therapy, and they pair very well with the 3 triads of the Enneagram. So if you're a heart type, I've found in my experience that what we call empathogens, that's the MDMA and MDA, tend to be the substances where those folks find the most healing and benefit. If you're a head type, then you're more likely to resonate to classical psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD. And then if you're a body type, and this is a new term, I'm inventing this term, I'm coining it. It's what we call a neologism, or a new word, and that's somatolytic. So soma means body and lytic means release. And that's just another fancy term for ketamine, essentially, at this point. And so, and what I found is that these are the substances where people tend to find the most benefit from. Now, it doesn't mean it's the substance you enjoy the most, although it can be. It's the one substance where it tends to target your deepest pain more effectively for you than for other types. And if this is true, now again, I put this big warning up here. These pairings are speculative. They're based on anecdotal research only, and they're not intended to promote or condone illegal activity. And yet, if this is true, now we have a very powerful tool, not only for predicting, anticipating, and integrating psychedelic experiences, but we also have a tool for targeting which substance is most likely to be beneficial for you. All right, now. I wish it was as easy as saying, okay, if there's three core substances for, and then there's 3 triads, and then we're done. But it actually gets more nuanced than that. So we need to dig into the instinctual variants of the Enneagram. And now many people are not familiar with the instinctual variants, and I don't have time to explain all of that in too much detail, but I'll give you a quick summary or overview of them. And what I'm doing in this is sort of my new formulation, a very different way of approaching the instinctual variants. And some people may find this very enlightening, and some people might take umbrage with it and disagree with how I'm presenting it, and that's fine. Love to hear that feedback. But I'm going to take this and link the instinctual variants, as others have done, to what we call affective neuroscience. So we have a lot of neuroscientists out there working with the Enneagram now. People like Dan Siegel, Jack Killian, Salav Lander, many, many others. I won't list all their names because I can't remember them, frankly. I'm not great with names. But what we know from the work of the affective neuroscientist by the name of Jaak Panksepp, who's very famous, he did this study with mice and rats, and he found that in the limbic system of all mammals, there's basically 7 core emotions. And this is true for human beings. It's true for your cat. It's true for your dog, right? And these are the 7 core emotions that all our other emotions we have are sort of variations, or they run off these. They're sort of an admixture of different combinations. And we have 3 positive emotions. We have 3 negative emotions. And there's one that's kind of in the middle. And so the 3 positive core emotions in mammals, as you can see on the screen, are going to be lust, right? Play, and care. So lust, the sex drive, mating. Play is so important, especially in children, but that's how we socialize and bond and connect as a community. And then care, which is caring for oneself and caring for others, like a mother caring for its child, grooming, those sorts of things. But then there's also core negative emotions in all mammals, and that would be anger, sadness, and fear. And that's the three triads of the Enneagram. So that's how, as I've discussed in other videos, that's why we have the three triads, because they're all being wounded by one of these core negative emotions more than the others. That's what creates your Enneagram type, essentially. And then we have this seventh emotion, and I call it, this is my formulation, this is my way of looking at it. I call it a neutral emotion because it affects all of them. And it isn't necessarily just positive or just negative. So if you think of an animal going after food, so is that a positive thing or a negative thing? Well, it's positive in the sense that it's going towards the food, but it's also going away from hunger. So it's, and so it can, this seeking is sort of seeking out positive things and avoiding negative things. So it affects both the positive and negative emotions in important ways. But then there's these instinctual variants, which means, here's how I think of the instinctual variants. Imagine you're in an early primitive tribe. You've got 20 to 100 people in your tribe. Well, you need different people to take on different roles within that community. And I call them the hunter, the gatherer, and the fire tender. And these are three instincts. We all have all three, but one of them is dominant, and then one is secondary, and one tends to be repressed. But you need a dominant one, but you also need a secondary in case you just step into somebody gets stepped on by a mastodon, right? Your leader gets killed, and then someone has to take their place. Well, you need to be able to fill multiple roles and have multiple competencies, but you can't be competent at everything, right? So, and we need diversity within those competencies. So let's take a look at each of these three instinctual variants. We'll start with the hunter. It's often called the one-to-one or the sexual drive. And if you have the hunter instinct, what that does is, if that's your dominant instinctual variant, it's going to increase lust and anger, but decrease fear. So anger and fear tend to be inversely correlated. So if one's going up, the other's going down. But hunters tend to be like if you think of like a bow and arrow, like a hunter with an arrow at a target, they want to like laser in on one thing. They can focus on a prey, kind of a hunting drive. But what that means in a sort of modern context is, like, if you're in a social situation, the hunter wants to connect with one, maybe two people very deeply in a party or conversation, rather than being the social butterfly who's running around the room talking to a lot of different people. And so the gatherer, we're often called the social type. They are the type who wants to run around. They're like the early Facebook of the tribe. They create group cohesion, and they hold everybody together by connecting with lots of different people, but on a more superficial level. And the gatherer instinct increases a heightened sense of play and a heightened sense of sadness. And the sadness is also, could be think of that as shame. Like they're more sensitive to being shamed by the ethos of the group. So they feel the sadness of being ostracized from the collective more than the rest of us. So that makes them more attuned to the ethos of the group and better able to fit in a social situation and make sure they're staying inside the boundaries of whatever that group holds their values to be, because they want to play with everybody. They're the social type. But that also the gatherer decreases anger. So sadness, that sense of shame, is inverse to anger in a sense. But anger would be a negative. If you're playing a game and like you're playing a board game with somebody and you're getting angry all the time, well, that's not conducive to play. So that play drive and the anger drive are inversely correlated to each other. And then if you're the fire tender, we call you the self-preservation, meaning you have an increased sense of self-care. You also have an increased sense of care for others, but you also have an increased fear, meaning you're more nervous about being harmed, right, by your environment. But that also decreases sadness, meaning you're not as concerned about what other people think about you. So if you're not having a good time, and it's like if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, let's go out and we're going out to a party tonight," and like, "Yeah, no thanks, I'd rather stay home and watch a movie." You don't mind. You're not going to feel sad that you've done something to take care of you that makes you a bit of an outsider to the group. It doesn't mean you're an outsider at all. It just means you're going to take care of yourself first and make sure that you're concerned about your physical safety, your comfort, your creature comforts, your diet, your sleep hygiene. You're the kind of person who's like, all right, it's 9 o'clock. I need to get to bed in an hour. Like, let's hit the door, right? Whereas the social type would be like, hey, it's only 9 o'clock. I'm ready to go till 2 a.m. Let's keep the party rolling, right? And then meanwhile, the hunter is off in the corner, just lost in the conversation with one person. All right, but then of course we have the seeking instinct. Of course, is going to influence all of these things, and it just it's sort of the mitigating and modulating factor between them. So, what does this have to do with the psychedelics? Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. If you're a hunter or the sexual one-to-one type, the increased lust and anger decreases fear. Because you have an increased anger, that's going to mean that you might be more find some benefit from ketamine or a somatolytic. And then, so think of it like this. You've got, just like you have an instinctual stack of hunter-gatherer, fire-tender, or fire-tender-gatherer, you're also going to have a psychedelic stack. There's going to be one psychedelic that, in addition to your Enneagram type, in addition to the triad that you're in, there's going to be a secondary substance that might benefit you. In this case, if you're a hunter, that would be ketamine. And I'll just go through them. And if you're a gatherer, that would be in pathogens like MDMA and MDA. Or if you're a fire tender, that would be from what we call the classical psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD. Well, why is that? Okay, so going back to the hunter type, what that does is it amplifies the increase in anger. It amplifies traits in the anger triad, creating what we call the extreme type. So if you're in the anger triad and you're a hunter, you're going to present more obviously as your Enneagram type. You're going to be just that much more of that type in how you face to the world than other of your brethren in your category. But if you were a hunter and you're in the sadness triad, it's going to be neutral. You're sort of the core type, the average type of your type, because the hunter instinct doesn't really affect the sadness at all, and so lust, anger, fear not part of the equation. But if you are in the fear triad, you're going to become the counter type, because the hunter instinct if you're in the fear triad, you're a 5, a 6, or a 7. Your instinctual variant is working in opposition to your Enneagram type, if that makes any sense. And that's why we have core types, counter types, and extreme types. Then looking at the gatherer, right? My hypothesis is again that they're going to benefit from pathogens like MDMA and MDA, because if you're a gatherer and you're in the sadness triad, you become the extreme type. You're much more that type than others. Whereas it's neutral to the fear triad, but you're the count if you're a gatherer and you're in the anger triad, right? So the social instinct decreases anger, and so it creates a counter type within 8, 9, and 1. And then if you're a fire tender, right, they're that increase care and fear, but the decrease in sadness. So that amplifies the traits in the fear triad. That's the extreme type, is neutral to the anger triad and counter to the sadness triad, creating the counter type, right? So the decrease in sadness makes you the counter type in 2, 3, and 4, but the increase in fear makes you the extreme type for 5, 6, and 7. Right? And then we have, again, ketamine for hunter, and pathogens, somatolytics for hunter, and pathogens for the gatherer, and then the classical psychedelics for the fire tender. And this is creating your psychedelic stack along with your instinctual stack. So hope that makes sense and plays out. Yeah, let's just leave it at that for now. I think that's enough for this video. I think I've covered a lot of ground. So just to recap, we now have 3 big breakthroughs with the Enneagram and psychedelics. One, we can use the Enneagram to help figure out the flavor, or to predict the flavor of experiences we're going to have on a psychedelic. We can use our Enneagram type to predict which psychedelic we're most dominantly likely to find beneficial. And we also can use our instinctual variant to find out what would be a secondary substance that would also be very helpful, could potentially be very helpful for us. Again, not necessarily the substance you enjoy the most, could be, but maybe the substance where you can find the most healing and benefit from, because that's the one that's most likely to target the unconscious wounds according to your Enneagram type. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share. I really appreciate you guys sticking through this video with me. As again, I'm always grateful for your support. Take care.